That joke isn't funny anymore. Available on Amazon and everywhere. Hey guys, welcome back to the Lou Perez podcast. I'm your host, Lou Perez, and today I am joined by a good friend in the podcasting universe, Mr. Charles Love. He's the host of the Cut the Bull podcast, which I am very fortunate to have to be kind of a regular guest. But I was just telling Charles, I feel like I haven't talked to him in a long time. The last time I was on Cut the Bull podcast, I think it was me, you, Will. I forget the other guest name, but we were talking with a former white supremacist or Klan guy or something like that.
Carlton, I think his name was. Yes, I remember him.
Yeah. So it was
about a month, a little more than a month ago.
Yeah. And for those of you who don't know, Cut the Bull, we record around 9 p.m., which for this 43-year-old father of two is really late, man. That is going all night.
Wait, isn't this 43-year-old father too also a stand-up comedian?
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
The daytime comedian.
I'm a daytime comedian.
Jokes at noon.
Yeah, let me tell you guys, like if anybody out there has like a brunch where they need a comic or something like that, I'm all about that. Man.
The nursing home set.
Yeah, exactly. And the more doped up the audience is, the better. I don't need laughs. I just need some dollar bills.
There you go.
If you have it. But yeah, so that was the last time that I that I talked with you. And trying to like recap, just thinking about, did I learn everything I ever wanted to know about white supremacy, former white supremacists? I don't know. I think there's still a lot of questions.
I thought it was odd, but I mean, it was interesting. It was good because I don't know if you were like, you're trying to think back, but if you all go and watch the episode, you tell me if you think I'm right or wrong.
And I'll link it.
I was trying to get out of him just how bad he was, what made him change his mind, and give us some inside dirt. Fly on the wall as a black man. I can't be in the room. Tell me how bad it is. And I guess I wanted more meat, but I guess I could also look at it as a positive in that he would describe stuff. If you remember, Lou, he would describe stuff, and I'm like, come on, there's got to be more. That's it. That's what you're looking for. No, I got to admit, I saw some really, some racist comments as a racist. Like what? Like somebody would be like, let's not, try to get signatures in certain neighborhoods. I try to suppress the vote in certain neighborhoods because that would be beneficial to, these were Republicans, by the way, would be beneficial to our outcome. I'm like, that just seems like smart politicking to me.
Yeah.
Why would I want to sign up the people who aren't going to vote for me? Right.
Yeah. In a way, it's kind of showing how progressive racists have gotten over the years. Like the amount of times that, I've, been online and someone will call me like a racist or a Nazi. I'm like, man, you are so fortunate that I am a racist and a Nazi, because that is showing just how open and, just how more progressive those terribly evil movements have gotten. Yeah.
I was expecting him to say stuff like, well, a couple guys had to hold one guy back because he wanted to go and shoot some colors.
Right. Or like we bombed it, we bombed a church or
even not even just like punch a guy, like, if I want to go, and punch black people, or, I'm moving out of the neighborhood because, a black family moved next to us. So we put our house on the market, obviously, like any good white man would. It was nothing like that. It was just more like, stereotypes, or they, it's the same thing the white liberals do.
Yeah.
Nothing different.
Yeah. I think I had asked them a question, something along the lines of, just because you're sort of a repentant racist, does it mean that you're a pushover when it comes to nuanced conversations about race and politics and all that? And it seemed like he wasn't. Like he was still ready to stand up and say, like, hold on a second, this claim actually doesn't have to do with racism, but and that sort of thing. But yeah, it is. It's. I have to admit, it is really weird when I kind of confront or am confronted with an actual racist. Like I've sort of, maybe I've been like kind of like so naive, or it's just where I grew up in New York and in 80s and 90s and stuff, where there was so much kind of like, sure, there were racist jokes and things like that, but it was under the kind of umbrella of we're joking around, and you could be white or Hispanic, but your heroes can be black, and it's sort of like that. And then I think it was sort of like when Elon kind of took over X, and then like legit racists started popping up and start talking about shit. And part of it I was like, well, all right, how many of them are bots, but how many of them are legit? Right. So I think there was definitely more bots than legit racists, but people coming out and just saying like, yeah, man, the Jews, it's the Jews. Yeah. And then you go and they have like a picture and a LinkedIn profile and all this, and being open about it. Right. So yeah, it is something where it is it is odd to see that, but I think it kind of like what you said, like it kind of talks, it kind of shows like how kind of better we have it, where it is so rare and so foreign to even come across that shit.
Yeah, I mean, the funny thing about the social media part, me, Will and I, it's the one thing that Will and I get into it all the time. Is like, I just keep saying, it's not real. It's not real. It's not real. And I always have to clarify. So it's not literally like, I don't think anybody on social media is real. Of course, many of them are. And I don't think that any of them really mean what they say. Of course they do. But we got to admit, don't you think they exaggerated? And the way I like to explain it is, none of us are old enough, but we've seen enough movies. We read enough books. We have parents and grandparents who tell a story. So even at the height of racism, right, like overt, blacks have their place, separate water fountain kind of deal like this, the real deal, the Jim Crow South, people were not on average as racist as the people are on Twitter now. Like, I don't think in 1940s Mississippi, somebody would say, because you see Twitter exchanges like this, like I follow people and I see somebody say, I was watching the game last night and such, and I think he did this stuff, and the person would reply, nigger. They wouldn't even do that in the 40s. This is fake. That's what I mean. It's like, even then, it's like, yeah, if the black guy in their mind got out of the place, they would do stuff. But in the normal, walking down the street, doing whatever, they weren't just going around every opportunity to have to say, you're less than me and you're not a true American.
There's something very, I would imagine, like very low class about that. Like I can't imagine, like I could imagine, more like wealthy people or, having those conversations behind closed doors and maybe after a few drinks, letting it out. But the idea, of like kind of using every opportunity
they can, right? To force it in. I'm not even disagreeing with you, and you just throwing it out there. Well, that's because he's an error. Like, really, you think that's what people? It's like a caricature of what a racist would do. Real racist. If you brought a Klan's member back from the 50s, they're like, well, I would never do that. That guy has no class.
Right.
What you do is you separate themselves from other people. Now he's right; they are less than us, but you don't need to constantly tell them that. Right? It's just weird.
Yeah. And you grew up where, Indiana?
Did you grow up? Near Indiana.
Was Indiana the birthplace of the Klan?
I believe so.
It was.
I believe so.
It produced.
What about many claims to fame?
Indiana produced two celebrities, the KKK and Charles Love.
I think Michael Jackson would have something to say about that.
He's definitely number 3.
He's number 3 with a bullet. Yeah. It's Oh no, we had. I mean, there were still. I don't know if they were at the time, but and I'm not that old, but there were still sundown towns in Indiana. When I remember going, I went to Indiana University and going to college. You drive down from northern Indiana. People say you don't stop in Martinsville, Morgantown. There were several towns down there. They joke about the county being called White County. There was a white county you had to pass to go there. It's like, yeah, you run out of gas, you go hide in the bushes till daybreak, and then you go walk to a gas station or something. Yeah, but that also shows the change. Like I remember places that I was like, we would go and play these games and go play sports in neighboring towns. Me and my friends would get chased out by white people like, we don't want blacks around here. And then 8 years later, they had a black sheriff. So my issue is everybody wants to talk about the first thing, but not the second thing. How do you think that happened so fast? You think all the white people moving out of town? The town was still 90% white, right? It's just that that's part of the problem with the race relations. The change we wanted to change, it was really much slower than it should have been for 70 years. And then compared to that, it was almost like overnight it changed and people weren't ready for it. They're like, why are they getting along? Right? This seems so weird, right? So now we're trying to claw back that, and it's madness. Fortunately, I don't think it's happened as much again in the real world. That's some Twitter nonsense.
Yeah. In my book, I have a chapter where I was talking about representation, in particular in like TV and film, and how, you know, you would think over the past few years, the way that representation is talked about, you would think that there were never like Black TV shows or Black movies. And it's just so odd to me. I felt like a kind of an alien, or, you know, maybe I'm from like an alternate universe. But when I look at the 90s in particular, like all the shows I watched were Black shows. You know, it's like
the 90s were big, right? Yeah.
You know, and it was good stuff too. It wasn't even, you know, it wasn't even like, oh, here's a token Black show. It's
or
like
caricatures where they all had to act like a certain way or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. And it was, you know, it was TV, it was movies, and all that. And so, yeah, I don't know. There's this weird, I don't know, this like, is it a purposeful erasure of what, you know, came before? I don't get it.
Yeah, it's weird. It's like, shout out to my buddy Clifton Duncan. He posted something the other day, and he was talking about, oh, okay, so you're telling me that, you know, we're complaining now because Blacks can't get roles unless we make the Black Snow White, remake stuff with Blacks in it, because otherwise no one would accept them. But then he's posting all these movies, not just because they had Blacks in them, but because they were uber successful. Bad Boys, Lethal Weapon, all these movies, you know, Chris Tucker with Jackie Chan, that made hundreds of millions of dollars, right? Eddie Murphy's whole career.
Yeah.
I think he was Black most of the time he did those movies.
Eddie Murphy would even do the stereotypical Black voice from there. Yeah. Like he would like that. So,
right. Yeah. So we had that. And here's the other side of the token. You know, I'm a big movie buff and I like older movies. So sometimes I go watch ones that I hadn't seen, or I'll go back and rewatch some. So I tell people they should do this. It will blow you away, especially in the times we're in now, the way people look at race. Go back. I can give you a couple of them. French Connection, which won Best Picture. The Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3, the original.
Yeah.
That's one you must watch. Watching these shows, these movies are so fascinating in two fronts. At the same, two things were happening at the same time. It's so weird if you're living in this time and you go back and watch them. At the same time, diversity matters. There was so much diversity. So there were Black cops. I was watching The Apartment, Best Picture. Oh, I used to be good. I'm forgetting the year. Late 50s, early 60s, right? Shirley MacLaine and Jack Lemmon. So Jack Lemmon works in a office where it's open desks, like 50 desks, all open with no cubicle walls, and they're all typing and doing whatever. White collar company, they all get on the elevator, or whatever. And in the background, you just see Black employees, you know, talking to managers, doing this stuff, sitting down, doing stuff. There's Black employees in the background, right? In this movie, based in the 50s, you know, white collar Black people. But at the same time, they are so casual with the N-word. But it's not like 50s it were like, you know, go string them up. It's like, you know, Roy Scheider and Gene Hackman are chasing this guy, and he's chasing him down the alley. And it was like, you know, sometimes he says that, well, tell that nigga to do it. We just drop it. Pelham 1, 2, 3. There's some Black cops. There's, you know, some of them are ranked like white shirts, but they still just like nigger, you know, again. And it's just like they just say it and they just move on. And or go even later, go watch Platoon. That was 86. Right. And they're all, there's a scene where they were talking to him and said, well, that's just such and such. He said, well, you're some old lazy nigger. Right. And then 5 minutes later, they're all having a good time, hugging each other, drinking a beer and singing a Motown song. Mm-hmm. If any of that stuff happened now, people would be canceled, fired. Right. You know, you pull stuff. It's like people just got over it. It wasn't a big deal. They were able to somehow put the parlance in the sense that this is reality. People will drop it every once in a while, but not make that character, lack of a better term, Hitler, right? You didn't hate that character after he said it. It's so weird.
Yeah, and there's sort of the people who are writing, you know, who are producing stuff now are kind of doing, I think they're hurting their own cause in that if you're making movies today, you know, as kind of like a form of activism,
Right.
Especially to point out how, racist and inequitable the past was. And you're cleaning up the language and the relationships so that they're more, PC for today. People are going to watch that and be like, well, wait a minute. It doesn't seem like the past was that racist. Actually.
Right. You made it so clean.
Yeah.
It's like, what's the big deal?
Or, there is going to be that kid who's going to be like, wait a minute. I thought there was racism in the past, but all the kings and queens are black. I don't know.
Then there's that.
What happened? How did it?
Well, we was kings. Don't forget that we was kings. Right. But I had a conversation with my friend a few days ago, and it's funny you mentioned that. So she brought up somehow. I don't know how we got to that. You have a general conversation. All these things comes up, and she's a Trump supporter, and she was talking about. Remember when Omarosa said she had a tape of Trump saying the N-word, and she was like, yeah, and we never got that tape, whatever, because it probably didn't happen. I said, oh my God. See, this is why you conservatives need to come to me to give you some advice, because you do a decent job sometimes, but you miss the low-hanging fruit to argue stuff. That's why I give people their argument. You make the mistake. She said, what do you mean? I said, many of you make the mistake of trying to debate with somebody who doesn't like Trump about whether or not there is a tape that exists of him saying nigger. Maybe there is, maybe there not. You're missing the easiest argument. And she's like, what is that? I said, think of everyone you know, every adult over 30. She's like, yes. How many of them do you think have never said nigger before? And she was like, well, I haven't. I was like, okay, but even if that's true, you would admit.
In bed, she said it.
But this I got her at the end. I said, the list is short, right? I was like, she's like, well, my kids haven't. I was like, really? Your kids are, early 30s, late 20s. They listen to rap music. Okay, maybe. And she's going down the list. I said, but you're missing the point. I can do you better. When did people, and people don't think about this, Lou, you'll love this. When did people start saying and using the term the N-word?
Yeah, when did that start?
That's fairly new, right?
Yeah.
It's got to be mid-90s or later, because they didn't do it when I was little. So that means every time somebody explained the situation, every time a kid came home crying because he got bullied by a group of white kids, he never said, and then they called me the N-word, because that term didn't exist. Mm-hmm. And then when she thought about it, she's like, that's right. And every time they read in high school, freshman year, between 8th grade and 10th grade, and they read Uncle Tom's Cabin, or they read Huck Finn, what did they say? What was the character's name? They didn't call him N-word Jim. Right. Because there was no N-word term. So then she was like, she thought about it, she's like, you're right, every single person I know have said it. So it's not the argument about whether there's a tape of him saying it or not. The argument should be everyone said it. So I'm sure there probably is a tape, right? But you can't say it, right? You can't say that someone said something that everyone else said without knowing the context, right?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Right, you could have been saying, well, how did your parents come up? Did they tell them? Well, my parents, my mom was like this, but my dad, he was rough, and he used to call black people niggas. You said the N-word in describing. Yeah. It's like the Papa John's guy. I couldn't believe he got canceled for that call.
Yeah, there was what's her name? She's like a cook, like a Southern cook, Diane. Man, I forget what her name is, but
Paula Deen.
Paula Deen, yeah. Mm-hmm. And Kurt Metzger, who's a comedian, has this bit about Paula Deen, where Paula Deen, she admitted that she had said the N-word decades and decades ago when she was a younger woman, and she was kind of canceled for it. Right. And then Kurt Metzger, the comedian, explains the context of that. She's like, she said this. She was a woman from the South, and she's a white woman from the South. She said it once, decades ago, during an armed robbery, or she was like describing the armed robber who was black, and he's like, she said it once. He's like, if anything, they should be making a monument to her that she, with her upbringing and all that, only said this word once. Yeah. But yeah, the context is so key. And then a few years ago, I mean, there was that, I think a failed attempt to sort of say that there is no context in which, reciting the N-word is okay. And it's like, well, that doesn't make sense.
I'm glad I missed that, because that's stupid.
Yeah. That lasted for a couple of weeks, because I remember at the time, and it was at the time when they were talking about, there were all these jokes about Trump having said the N-word or wanting to say the N-word and all that. And it's like, but there was actually zero evidence, pointing to it. But meanwhile, if you take like Joe Biden, there's all these different, all these different times of him on camera saying it, in public settings. And of course the context is important, but it's like, yeah, if you're going to hold people up to just uttering that word, being a cancelable offense, then, a lot of people are going to have to, go hide away from society.
And I'm sure you as a comedian can understand my view on it, in that, I was bothered by it as a grown, on two fronts. One, if somebody's really openly that racist, I kind of want to know. So let them do themselves. But in an easier, lesser context, it's like, we're all adults. Do we really I don't want people going around talking like children, in the sense that I don't want them to be racist, and I don't want them calling black people niggers. But at the same time, if you're describing what someone said, it seems weird to be like, and then he said N-word. Yeah. I was like, so what's the big deal? So he said N-word. No, I mean, he said the word. He said what word? N-word.
Right.
It makes no sense. Say what he said, right? If you're gonna say what you describe some gruesome act, you can say, and then he did something bad. Now he needs to do 20 years. I need to know what he did, right? When somebody, gets a lesser sentence in court by accepting the plea, they make him allocute, right? You gotta get up there and tell me what you did. Yeah. Right? You're not gonna get up there and say, well, I did some bad things. Well, what? Tell us what you did, right? So I don't understand why there's no context. So I can't tell you what he said. I can't tell you what he did. I mean, it's silly. I mean, you're adults. I mean, and at the same time this is happening, TV shows and movies are getting more graphic in everything else they do, right? They show more. I mean, I talked earlier about watching all these old movies. The other thing was funny. What movie was I watching? I watched All About Eve again, right? And you got a married couple, and the phone rings in the middle of the night. Somebody calls and they turn the light on, and they're not just in separate beds. You used to have the separate beds next to each other. They were perpendicular to each other. So he was like on the other side of the room. Right? And it's a married couple, but you can't show them in the bed. This was before they got to the point where you could put a foot on the ground, but you could be in the same bed. So we went from that to like open sex, right? We went from that to open, gender fluidity and all that stuff, to open, violent, gratuitous violence and cutting people up. And it also, remember, keep in mind, everybody notices that change from clean and wholesome to kind of graphic, but it also went from, in the movies, clean to graphic, and then the graphic went from there to TVs. Remember, the TV shows used to be like, well, they were they show a little bit, and they made a big deal the first time.
NYPD Blue, you remember?
Before that, right? You're right.
We saw some ass.
Naked, right? Yeah. The first time that Joan Collins said bitch on TV, and it was like, oh, right. Mm-hmm. And now you can curse on TV. And then it was the first time you had a little bit of sex. Now that's plenty of sex. But you look at Criminal Minds, you look at all these shows with the serial killers, and they show the bodies and the cuts and everything, right? So at the same time, all that is open. And the left is telling you to fly your freak flag and be as open as you want, and sex work is legitimate work. But then they clutch their pearls, whatever remember they said they attacked Moms for Liberty because they said one of the founders had a alleged threesome with somebody else, and I'm like, it's not about whether it's true or not. Why do you care?
I want to fact check you on that. Which one was that?
I don't even know her name because I've been thinking she was gone at the time, so it's not even the two that everybody knows. Yeah. But it was a big story for a while. It was like, and so every time they would make a good point about something in education, people would reply, "But what about the threesome?" I'm like, "But you people love gratuitous sex. Why are you mad about that?" Right?
There's so much there. For one, I got to meet. Oh, you hear me? You good?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I got to meet Tiffany Justice from Moms for Liberty. And at a show I was opening for Rob Schneider down in Florida. And she and her husband were at the show. And we talked a little bit.
The two of them? I kid. It wasn't her. Go on.
It wasn't. And she's a very attractive woman. I will put it out there. And we were talking, and she brought up, sort of a similar thing where she's like, I'm an adult. Yeah, I make love, with my husband, and we do adult things. We're talking about children. Mm-hmm. So it's sort of like when the critics of Moms for Liberty are bringing up those things, it's like you're kind of showing your hand in that you're treating children and adults as if they're the same, as opposed to having a clear separation of it. Like me, I'm a dirty comic. I have a foul mouth. I used to write erotic fiction and stuff like that. I take part in a lot of, adult activities, right? I'm also a dad. I don't want that shit anywhere near my kids, you know? And for me, it's very simple. I'm the adult. I'm the father.
Right.
This is what's appropriate for me. I don't want that other shit near my children. And yeah, the critics really, I think, show their hand there.
Right. Yeah. I mean, but these people are emotionally weak. So everything they do, if you just peel back one layer and not get, you know, say, I try to train their critics and like, if don't get upset. Even I understand it's easy because what they're doing is so, you know, unconscionable. But if you just take a step back, it's so easy to pick apart what they're saying. Yeah. So then there's the other side of it. A lot of when the threesome thing came up, that was there. But prior to that, they like to call them all soccer moms and prudes, right? You're a prude. Right. You probably never have sex. And Tiffany was like, I have children.
Yeah.
What do you think they came from, right? Yeah. So even those arguments don't make sense, right? So because I don't want you to put porn in my 5th grade of school, that means I'm against sex. I've never had sex and I'm a prude. Or maybe I'm just a real adult and you're a whack job. Maybe that's the solution. Maybe that's the answer to the problem.
And also it's like, you know, we all, you know, as adults, we all have the stuff that we're into. Some of us are, you know, into kinks. Our kinks don't involve kids. Like
maybe that's the problem.
Yeah, I think that's a problem. You know, I really do think that a lot of people, I think a good question for, you know, critics of like Moms for Liberty is to ask them, well, why do you want my child to read and see pictures about strap-ons? Why do you want my child to do? Because you have to have that answer there. You know, if you're really fighting for that.
Yeah, they're so emotional, so they just come up with some weird stuff. It's like you could teach your kid. I actually, Moms for Liberty did an event here in New York, and I was there, and I was on a panel, and in the end we opened it to questions, and I think the second question was that from one of the parents. It was really shrewd. You got to give her credit for her. You know, insane, twisted logic. She asked us, if you want to believe whatever you want to believe and teach your kids whatever you want to teach, I'm open to that and you have the right to do that as a parent. What I don't understand is why you want to force your beliefs on us. That was her question. Why we want to force our beliefs on other kids, why other kids have to be exposed to our beliefs. But what we were pushing was void of a belief. Right. We weren't pushing a belief. We were saying, we don't want you to push any belief on, you know, kindergarten through 4th grade. You're saying that they need to understand about gay pride. I say they don't need to understand it. I didn't say that they should learn to hate gay people. I said they should not be taught in a public school about why they should have pride in being gay. And you say I'm pushing my agenda. Why can't you just teach your kid at home that gay is the best way to be?
Yeah.
But that's how they twist it. So there's really no way to have a logical debate and back and forth with people who are intentional about being disingenuous, and you know they are, you know, emotional and not really trying to be logical.
Yeah, and yeah, for those who you who don't know, Charles, one of his it's not even a side hustle because you don't even get paid for you don't even get paid to be on a school board, but you know you're part of the is it technically the New York City School Board?
Yeah, they call it the CEC. They call it Community Education Council because New York, if anywhere else in the country, people would look at New York and like, that's so weird because it's so big.
It's huge. Yeah.
So I remember telling my friends, there's 32 councils. And they're like, 32? How do you get it done? You know, we have, you know, one school board. I was like, yeah, but you have one school board in your city of 60,000. We have 1 million kids in public schools. Right. And so they break it up in a sense of high school separate, and then K through 8 has their own, and then they do it by district, and then they have the D75, so the students with disabilities, and then so they break them up. Like then they have PEP, which you know kind of manages different parts of the education system. The CEC is a parent led, so you have to have a child in public school to be on the CEC. And so I'm on District 2's council. District 2 is the largest and the most affluent district. So we got arrows at the beginning just from that. And yeah, so for every month for now, they celebrated a birthday last month. So for about a year, they've been coming, the trans activists have been coming to the meetings to protest every month, calling us homophobes and transphobes and ironically racist. Yes, I'm the only Black guy there. And saying we are literally killing kids. And saying they're going to vote us out, bussing people in. Most of them don't even, I don't have a problem with people having different viewpoints, but most of them don't even have kids in the school district.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up. That is something because, it doesn't, it doesn't really make sense. You know?
And the argument is that, all kids matter. They love to say, I thought you couldn't say it's like all lives matter. Can't say that. All kids matter. But they don't mean that because they only talk about trans and LGBTQ kids. So all kids matter, but those are only ones they talk about every month. So we have a public speaking session and they all get up there and they all talk about their, I got a 5-year-old trans daughter. But here's the weirdest thing, because again, this is why my approach is this. So most of our council members get attacked. There's 4 of them who agree with them. They're activists from the council. And the rest of them kind of on the side of logic, like do whatever you want to do, but don't stop involving these young kids. And so they attack them. They want them out. They yell at them. Toward the end, they started to, but for months, they never really said anything to me. Part of it is because, they're white liberals and they don't want to be seen on video yelling at them. But it's also because I didn't attack them. I just asked them because I know how to speak to them. I'm saying, okay. So they would say stuff like, all the kids matter, but you need to do this, that, and I would say, well, what exactly do you want? They're like, well, we need to understand, well, why do we need to talk about this with all the kids? It's such a minority of kids. Well, why can't we talk about education and things that matter as kids are failing in schools? And they'll say stuff like, well, you can't focus on education until all the kids are safe. All the kids? Right. So you can't say this stuff because, I'm the realist. I'm like, so we can't teach kids until all 1 million kids are safe. Forget about the LGBTQ thing. So
just safe in general. Yeah.
Every kid who's being abused by his parents, which we got in 1 million kids, there got to be something. We all agree there's something.
Right.
Yes. So until those kids are free and safe of that abusive parent, my kid can't learn. That's what you're saying. Until there's no racism, kids can't learn. Until what you're saying makes no sense. The public school's job is to teach. Your job is not to fix all of society's ills. It's not. And you're doing all of them poorly because you're not fixing the social ills and you're not teaching the kids because kids can't do math or read at grade level. So you're failing at everything. Why don't you focus on what your reason for being is and worry about those other things later? So they'll come in and they'll say, so we had a resolution passed to reevaluate the gender guidelines. And the gender guidelines in the city says you can do, they move from gender identity, gender expression. So whatever you express yourself to be, the school is saying that we're openly going to adhere to that. So if you show up looking just like Lou at school today, saying my name is Lou and I'm a man, and then on Wednesday you say you're a girl, you are instantly a girl. Everyone must use your pronouns. You get to use the bathroom you want. And we're like, well, why don't we talk about that and see if that's really fair? Now they frame it as it's just sports. And so their argument is, well, why are you arguing about K-8 sports when it's not competitive level until high school? Yeah, but it's still changing places, bathrooms, right, pronouns, and all that kind of stuff. And the question is, Lou should be able to say he's a girl if he wants. And I firmly believe that. However, Lou should not be able to force me to say he's a girl. Right. So they talk about misgendering and things of that nature. That's where you get too far. Lou can call himself a woman all he wants, but if I say he's not a woman, I should not get in trouble for that. Right. Mm-hmm. And if the last thing I'd say about that, where they don't understand what they're pushing for, if a kid has an issue with his gender expression and it's affecting him in school, both his education, his home life, he's being bullied, you should deal with that. Right. You find a way to deal with that issue. But you're dealing with the issue as it comes up. What they do, because they think this is the best way to solve problems, is be preemptive. So they walk into kindergarten, first grade, second grade classes, and they bring the topic up when there has been no issue. And they say, some boys are really girls, and that's okay. Right. So why are you putting that on 20, 30, 40 kids who are not even thinking about that because you think that is preemptive and it's going to prevent some bullying, which obviously it won't do anyway. And the parents have no say in that.
Right.
So.
Yeah, I'm just imagining like all the kids just kind of looking at each other, be like, which one, which ones of us, or then they look at themselves and it's like,
right.
Am I a girl? And
it's not one time they keep doing it. So one time you're like, oh, when is that going to turn them gay? Of course not. But right, it's a constant thing. They had gender identity week when my son was in second grade or third grade. I think maybe third grade, where they read books about you know, the Jacob's New Dress and Sparkle Boy and the Not Quite Narwhal, which is, you know, slowly, because it's about a narwhal who thinks he's a unicorn. Hint, hint. Right?
Right. What the fuck? Yeah.
And so I
learning
asked
about a narwhal anyway. That's
right. So
an
I asked
odd creature.
I asked the school. I said, "So what's the educational purpose of the school of the book?" And they're not thinking. They're like, "Well, it's to let them understand that you might think, you know, that you're one thing and be something else." I said, "So." A narwhal can think he's a unicorn. Is he a unicorn? Right. And so are you saying that the same thing for a person? So a person can think he's a woman and that's what you're saying to 7-year-olds?
Well, even if you think about it, I mean, unicorns don't exist. So the narwhal is already thinking that it's a creature that is mythological. It doesn't exist. So,
right.
I mean, if they're making it a 1-to-1.
Right. And then the last thing is, the last part, I mean, it's a problem because you shouldn't be doing it to kids anyway. It's not part of education. Let people do whatever they want. If an issue comes up and arises, you deal with it, but you shouldn't be pushing it. And openly, I'm proud to say that we're doing this or this, right? Like, you know how these business companies have these affinity groups, like the Black group and all that stuff, which I hate anyway. And in high schools have them, whatever, you roll your eyes, they're older. But my kids' elementary school have affinity groups. So yeah, this is how they're slick. So it's elementary school, so it's K through 5, pre-K through 5. Now 3K through 5 because they have 3K. So that means, and since New York is calendar year,
3K.
That means there are 2-year-olds in the school. 2-year-olds.
Oh,
if you were born in December of December of 23, you could be in my son's school, right? So they're all in the same school. They mill about. There's only one administrative office, right? So yes, to be fair, only the third through fifth or fourth through fifth can join the LGBTQ plus affinity club. But the flyer for it is hanging in the office. Right, the conversation is posted all over the school. So now that your 6-year-old, your 3-year-old, your 2-year-old are like, "What's that?" Right, and so why would elementary school kids need an affinity group anyway? Especially since you're teaching it in the curriculum that's nonstop talk about this stuff.
Well, it's almost like at that point, especially with the 2-year-old, like the affinity group is who shits their pants and who doesn't shit their pants, like split them up. But, you know, like with me, my oldest just turned 5 and my youngest is 3. He'll be 4 later this year. And well, obviously he'll be 4 later this year, unless something really bad happens. But my youngest is he started walking really early. He started talking really early. And with him, I think both my wife and I, probably me more than anything, we sometimes forget how young he is because he's so precocious, especially with the verbal. Mm-hmm. And you know, something that's kind of always been on my mind since having kids is, you know, if your kid isn't verbal, then if something happens, even if it's something benign, they can't express and tell you what happened, or if they felt, or if something made them uncomfortable. Again, this doesn't have to be like, you know, a sexual assault or anything like that. But if anything makes them uncomfortable, if they're unable to express it, then that's a really unfortunate position to put your child in. And, right. You know, having like putting your 2-year-old in a system like this, I mean, just in general, I mean, you're already, you know, taking a huge a leap of faith by, you know, having other, you know, adults, effectively raising your kid. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that's something I'm just really, really uncomfortable with. And fortunately, like, you know, with my kids, they're both very expressive. And, you know, if something happens that makes them feel, you know, uncomfortable, or, you know, even if they had like an argument with a friend at right. school and they feel bad about it, you know, they can tell you about it. And that's just so important, especially when, you know, with, you know, like legislation and I don't know if it passed in California, the idea that, you know, a teacher doesn't have to tell the parent if your child is, you know, considers himself the opposite gender, or, you know, changes their, you know, their gender. You know, keep the name, keep it, you know, keep it. It wasn't even
just California. There was a Massachusetts, I believe, also did that.
Yeah. And it's just like, no, it's like, as a parent, if you as an adult have secrets with my child, then you got a lot of fucking things to worry about.
Right.
You know, because that's just not cool. And it's also like, you know, in the same way, going in on that first day of kindergarten and over saying, boys can be girls and blah, 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 putting that idea out there. The idea that they're putting out there is that somehow every parent is a monster ready to abuse their children or, cast them out of the fucking house if they happen to be, a future, gay or lesbian kid. And that's really, that's really fucked up just to put that. It's like almost like, hey, you should fear your parents,
Right. Yeah, that's crazy. And then, what I used to tell them about it, because, everything, when they get so emotional when you talk about the LGBTQ plus kind of deal. So I said, let's take them out. I'm a black guy, if they hadn't noticed. And I said, it's not that I don't expect people the things in the real world to come up. You take your kid about the world, even outside of school, you take them on the train or you drive them someplace, go to the store. You can't control whether they see gay people or black people or racist or, or homeless people, whatever. The world's the world. But you're explaining them in a logical context. It's not it's not like you just brought a homeless guy into your house. So you can say you stick that into the environment so you can see how they react. It just happens and they ask about it, organically. So I was like, it's not that I don't want my kid to understand that there's races out there. I want him to learn it the old fashioned way like I did. I went to play with a group of kids, some white kids. Like, I'm not playing with you because you're black, right? Calls you a nigger and you're like, what's going on? And you ask your parents. That's totally different. It's not like I'm trying to control for that. But that's different from standing in front of the classroom. Parents, I hope they stop doing it as, emphatically as we all used to do. But you send your kids to school and you're like, that teacher's your authority figure. You listen to what that teacher says and you do what they say. So you're planting in your kid's mind to trust that parent, that adult, that they're going to do a proxy for me. And then you get in class and then they're teaching them things like, what, blacks are oppressed. Or they're saying things like, you can change your gender, or America's a terrible country, or whatever they want to say, right? So you just primed your kid to listen to that and everything they tell them as fact. So what happens when they start to bring their agenda into the classroom? Of course, they're going to be influenced by that because you told them to. Not to mention that they train these teachers to be their buddies, so they don't say boys and girls. They're all like, okay, friends, and they call the teachers by their first name. So they talk to them like they're equal. So my son thought his second grade teachers were his buddies, right? You call them by first name. We're all friends, whatever. So then when he doesn't listen to them, I tell him, well, maybe if you had some authority, he'd start listening to you.
Was he really going by the first name?
Oh yeah, this teacher he's in fourth grade now. His fourth grade teacher is the first teacher he's had since being in school that likes to be called by her last name.
Oh, nice. My fourth grade teacher, Mrs. Levinson, she was great. That was my fourth grade teacher. She had amazing Robert Plant hair, like big rock and roll hair. I was really lucky, man. I'm looking back and I went to public school in Woodside, Queens, and I had like great teachers, one after the other, like all the way up through sixth grade for sure. Middle school, there were like a couple here and there, and then high school, a couple here and there. But it was just, I'm just thinking back, like, man, it was so, I was very fortunate to have the crew that I had.
I would say the same thing. My elementary school teachers were fantastic. It's weird watching people and it's actually beneficial for what I do now in having these conversations, school board, educational things, because people have these assumptions about, black and what black people go through in America and growing up black, and like, you have to teach them different, this culturally relevant teaching, which is terrible, but they can't learn unless they see themselves. So you got to have a gay character, you have to have a Native American character, you have to have Indian character, all this kind of stuff. That's bunk, as evidenced by the fact that how did anybody ever become successful when they weren't doing that? But I think my case is even better because I grew up in an all black town. Like, I never went to school with a white kid until I was a freshman, and that kid dropped out. So I graduated. I mean, I saw a couple white kids, but they weren't my year, right? So there was one guy who was 2 years behind me.
You sure they were real? They weren't ghosts?
Oh,
like
no,
just spirits walking through the halls?
They stand out. They were real. So they were probably like 3 or 4, right? The whole time. Never in my class except for that one girl that 1 year. But I grew up, so I went to elementary school in the 70s and 80s. And my teachers were just like most elementary school teachers. They were mostly women, mostly black, except for the ones who held over. So my fourth grade teacher, Ms. Sangaris, was white, but all the rest of them were black. Right. So obviously they're 15, 20 to 30 years older than me. So they were children of the civil rights movement. Right. So they were very pro-black. They taught us about, black figures and all that stuff. But they loved America. They weren't America's a racist place. They didn't teach us that. Right. They taught us that if you work hard, that's how you get ahead. They told us that we can compete with anybody. Right. It's all about how much work we put in and how we teach you. And we're not going to teach you like you're different from anyone else. And it was a very positive experience. And so it's just so weird to go forward 40 years and watch people watch my kid who's growing up in an affluent neighborhood go to a school and they're telling him he's oppressed or telling them that blacks learn different. I actually had the white people who think they're helping the allies are the worst, who actually say, well, of course, blacks don't do as well in English and on certain tests because they learn differently. It doesn't mean they're not dumber. It's not like they can't learn. They just learn differently. I'm like, what do you mean? Well, they come from an oral tradition.
What the fuck?
So, excuse me?
You've been here fucking over 400 years. Yeah.
Right. So they came from an oral tradition in 1510. Because I think that, even the older blacks with the older family members, you're still talking 8 generations back. What do you mean they come from an oral tradition? So everybody was oral until they started writing. And yes, they started writing at different times, but they started writing at different times, 100 years here or there, not 1,000.
Right.
It's not like blacks in Africa didn't start writing until 1910.
Yeah.
Right. And even so, that would still be generations. So that still would mean their kids didn't come from an oral tradition. But so they're acting like we can't read and write, not because, it's just like a different spin on the white racism, not because they're, not smart enough. It's just because they're just different, right? They don't think that way. They don't talk that way. They don't act that way. But that's because no one taught them. It's not because they can. They grew up in America. So the language around them is American and it's English and everybody in the schools is teaching English. So I don't understand what you mean by a third grader can't read if he's black because he learns differently. So you have to teach him. It's like that whole school, the culturally relevant thing. Maybe if we rap the stuff to them, they'll get so rap. We can get into
we got to put a beat. We got to put a beat behind.
Right.
So
are you saying there were no black people in the 50s? Of course there were black people in the 50s. You saying they didn't go to school? Of course they go to school. But did they rap to them? Because no one was rapping in the 50s.
Right.
So what makes you think the only way my kid can learn is if, the math problem has the kid in the math problem's name is Jamal.
Right.
Well, my son doesn't know anyone named Jamal.
It's not a popular name anymore.
Right. It's insane. All his friends are named Barack. Thank you very much. No, but it's just insane to think that that's the only way that blacks can learn. So you're actually handicapping them by limiting them to believe that they can learn. I'm not saying they can learn, but only in these very specified silos of education. You can't just stick them in a classroom with white kids and expect them to learn.
On the cultural front, something that's really kind of surprised me over the past few months, and something that I didn't really know about. I'll give it an example. So I saw a tweet from a woman who I guess is a foundational Black American or an American descendant of slaves. And she was commenting, she made a comment about going to see a doctor. And she's like, when I go see a doctor, I want to see a doctor, a Black doctor who understands my culture. Mm-hmm. I don't want to go see any of these African or Caribbean doctors. I want to see one who had a nana or a granny who baked some kind of apple pie, some kind of pie or something like that. Mm-hmm. And I had retweeted it with something like, the first question you need to ask your oncologist is, did their granny bake this pie? But it sort of, it opened up this world that I didn't know about, this tension between foundational Black Americans and Black immigrants who are kind of coming here, taking our jobs, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. And somebody on the thread had pointed out, it's really important for, especially when seeing a doctor, that they understand your culture and you're able to, to talk. And I said, even though I'm not Jewish, I try to make sure that all my doctors had a bar mitzvah. That's just what I tend. That's who I tend to go.
Culture. That's culture.
It's culture. It's culture. So of course, Charles is everyone's go-to Black American. Can you explain to me what's going on, Charles, and where you are on this? I know on the spectrum of Black Americans versus the other Black Americans.
Well, you are correct that I do speak for all of the Blacks.
There we go.
So what I say is pretty much, the gospel. No, it's interesting. There is kind of a subculture thing. Like, have you heard the term tether?
Yes, and actually, and so thanks for setting it up. But I got to let people in on this. When I asked Charles to do the show, he was like, "What do you want to talk about?" And the first thing I said was tethers, and he was just LOL.
And I just started laughing.
Yeah.
No, but it's funny you mentioned that, because I don't think that you could find a better person to talk about that. And I'm saying and I'm kind of serious. It's because I look at it like this. If you just poll all the people, well over 50% of the people have no idea what that is about, nothing about it, never heard it, nothing, right? Yeah. So set that aside. But of the people who do, most of them fit into one or two buckets. They're either like super, in agreement with that, which we'll get into what that is, and say that's a problem, and they highly focus on it. And this is probably like, you see a lot of that stuff on Twitter. And then other people are like, no, that's crazy. We're all the same. And they love that. I kind of like look at this the same way I look at everything else, and think it's a little bit more nuanced and put it in context. So while some of it at the extreme, I think is bat crap crazy, but they're not completely wrong either. So I don't dismiss it. So there's a little nuance to it. So let's just quickly say what it is, because like I said, a lot of people won't even know what it is. Basically, tether is like tethering onto. They're calling, so like he mentioned, FBA or ADOS, American Descendants of Slave or Foundational Black Americans, are saying that there is a difference between a Black person with lineage, as they call it in America, with been here 5, 6, 7 generations or more, and somebody who's a Black immigrant, right? So that's one thing. And so, but that's not the tether term. They're saying there's a difference. That's one thing. They're saying there's a difference. That's one. And then they're saying because of that difference, the tether part is because they're saying that many of them are, kind of either cosplaying Black culture, or they're using it to their advantage. That's the second argument. And there's the third thing you're saying, kind of like, taking our job, living as, this. And then the bigger arguments would be they spin it to their advantage when it suits them, and then they kind of shun it when they don't. And I am, because I'm a fair person, as you know, so I'm trying to be as fair and honest as possible. I don't think they're completely wrong. I think the premise is wrong, and I think the solution is wrong, but I'm not going to say they're completely wrong. So I say, of those three things, one I disagree with, one I partially agree with, and one I don't necessarily agree with, but I understand. So shall I go into them, or do you want to say anything first?
No. Let's take them like piece by piece, and then any questions I'll have,
Okay. So the first thing, are they different? I 100% agree with them. I think they're right. Now, what it means, we'll get to. But in the sense that I actually said this, and I say this to some of my immigrant friends, and they even agree. I say this I was talking to a Chinese couple, they're immigrants. And I say, people talk about this, and people make fun of the people who call them tethers and separate FBAs from whatever. But to be fair, a Black immigrant, right? So somebody who is, let's say, 30 years old, and they're Black, and they came in from Nigeria or somewhere,
and they're wearing sweatpants and tuxedo shoes
when they were, let's say, 8 or 9, right? Parents were born there, they moved, have more in common with a Chinese immigrant than a Black person. And I tell you why. The difference is, for whatever reason, right? If you talk about Black history, Black people tend to, because they're talking to their parents and their grandparents, have kind of like a relational, familiar kind of feeling to the civil rights movement. They look at Martin Luther King like their uncle, right? There's this family, right? That's our struggle. Isn't always right, though. But that's the way they look at it, right? Whereas someone who comes here as an immigrant, they talk about slavery and all this stuff. Well, if you come here as an immigrant, regardless of where you come from, Argentina or Nigeria, you're coming here by choice, right? You're like, I've heard about this American dream thing. I don't really like what's going on here. I'm going there. We even talk about people make fun of the people from these different countries that are struggling. Like you come from Venezuela, you come from a struggling country in the middle of Africa. They'll say, see, Africans are better, they work hard or whatever. And then the Thomas Sowells and others will say, well, let's be fair. There's some merit to that, but you also have to take all the information and say some of those people are self-selecting in the sense that the people from that country who come across are giving up a lot and doing a lot to come here. And some, and every situation is different, but some are coming, if they're fleeing a country, they could have been middle class and educated, right? So you got doctors like we famously after World War II coming here to drive cabs because it's better to be here than to be there, right? So why you're coming plays a part. So those people, for every one of those, there's 10 people like, yeah, it's bad here, but I'm afraid of what's on the other side. So I'm not a risk taker. So you're already self-selecting risk takers, right? Yeah. But beyond that, the bottom line is you're coming here because you have hopes and dreams and you hear that there's possibility in America, where the great-great-great-grandparent of the Black foundational American, right, doesn't have that background. So it's just different, right? Some of them, depending on which country they come from, every majority Black country is not the same, have different ethnic groups like Ghana, right? Some of them speak different languages, right? So if you come from a country that speaks, you come from Haiti and you speak French, right? And you come in here because of the earthquake or because of crime, you're coming here for a very specific reason. So yes, you have more in common with an immigrant who's fleeing communist China, right? Than you do Black Americans, right? So they're technically on the face right that there's a difference. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, and just to jump in, I think there are a number of things that kind of like trigger me, and one of them is conversations like the one I described, which kind of reads to me as kind of like, I'm American, these fucking outsiders build the wall, sort of thing. And me being, my dad's an immigrant, that kind of gets me like, oh, okay, you can't compete. You can't compete with my people who, or at least the half of my people who came. My mom was American, and that sort of gets the hackles up. Right. But I think the historical basis for it, I hear what you're saying. I understand the argument.
Right. So that's the first thing. So the FBAs and those other people can't say I'm discounting what they're saying because there is a difference. You can't argue that. Like my wife is Jamaican and so that's a little bit closer. They speak English. It's not like coming from Africa, right? But there are things that she'll say. I'll joke with her. I was like, yeah, you don't understand that because you've never heard it before. It's like, what is that, right? Well, and it kind of depends on your age, how long you've been here, that kind of thing. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is the tethering and the cosplaying and that kind of thing. That was a little bit more complicated. That's a 50-50 thing. So do some of them kind of co-op? Yes. But is it intentional to try to get over or just because it's in the ether, just like white people who listen to rap music because it's out there, right? They're not claiming it as their own. They just think it's cool. So I'm doing whatever. I like that guy, whatever. Right. So part of that is where they're blaming them for intentionally, that's what's key. Is it intentional, right? Because human nature, of course, I'm going to take advantage of what I can take advantage of, which kind of bleeds into the other thing. Whereas, yes, of course, I mean, I'm a regular, I'm out from my own, best interest. So if I'm able to blend in, I speak a different language. Let's take the extreme where they have an accent, whatever. But still, when a white person sees me, they see a Black person, right? So that could be good and bad, right? So I'm going to take the good when it's good. I'm not going to take the bad when it's bad. So where I need a job and companies are like, diversity is our strength and we need to have, I'm trying to get into Harvard and I get extra points for being Black. That's why I kind of agree with the FBAs when they argue that I don't think you should be picking people based on race. I mean, I wrote articles about that. I'm clear. However, let's be fair. If you're going to do it to help Black people because they've been discriminated against, you don't give it to the Nigerian prince.
Ann Coulter has actually talked about this a lot. The idea, like when you do look at a lot of like the elite colleges, the trick that they kind of play on, when they, check the diversity boxes is like, we got a Black kid. And it's like, yeah, his dad is an oil tycoon from Nigeria. And I mean, the guy's loaded, in Nigerian money, in U.S. money. He could be he could be anywhere. And they're like, look, see, we got him, but they're not.
Yeah, both sides win. He gets into the elite school. You get a great brochure. Who loses out? The guy that you supposedly were trying to help, right? So, I mean, Skip Gates wrote an article about this years ago. You can go find it where he interviewed people. I think the school was Dartmouth, where the black students there complained, and that's where they wanted their own separate distinction. They wanted them to separate the two because they found out that like 60% of the black students at Dartmouth were American. They were all immigrants or children of immigrants. Mm. So if the point is to help blacks, you're not doing it. So they're right about that. Yeah. However, obviously, if I'm going to get in, I'm going to use it. I'm not tethering intentionally. But of course, if Harvard wants to let me in because they think I'm black, I'm going to take the Harvard exception. And on the flip side, this is where they get upset too. But what are you supposed to do? When I get lumped in as black in the negative, like you people commit these crimes, they're like, well, I'm not one of them. I'm Nigerian.
Yeah.
That's where they get mad.
Do not do the crime. Okay. Yeah.
Right. Why do you blacks walk like that? Like what's it? Godfrey was talking about his father, and then they laugh and they throw their head back.
well, Godfrey. Godfrey is an interesting case too because I mean, he's been a comedian for so long. A really successful comedian, a great stand-up comic, who's often come out. And he did like one video. He was like doing an interview and talking about how. I think in particular, like white people, like they love our shit. They try to do our stuff. They, right. Kind of othering the whites. And it's like, well, Godfrey, technically in this conversation of foundational black people, you're the other, you're the tether, And
he even made fun of his father making fun of black people.
Right.
Why do they look like that? Why do they talk like that? Why do they laugh like that?
Yeah.
Right.
Why do they laugh? Like
that? I love that part. Throw his head back. That's him doing black people. But so there's that. But the problem with the most interesting part of this debate is, this is the last one I say, I kind of see where they're saying in the sense that it's the best examples, there's many, but the best examples are traditionally, obviously, easily Kamala Harris. Mm-hmm. But then more recently, Zoe Saldaña. Did you see her acceptance speech when she won Academy Award?
Oh, yeah. I didn't see the acceptance speech. I heard about it.
It's really short. It's like 3 minutes. Go check it out. So basically, some people, and because depends on where you are. You look. So she looks. So she could pass without.
And let's just say she's fucking drop dead gorgeous. I mean, that's the thing too. Like I think
if you like those tethering kind of.
Yeah. Every race, ethnicity would love to be able to claim Zoe.
Right.
Sometime.
So she like, but my point is, you could look at her and be like, is she, black or is she a black Latina? Because she never really says. So it's that's I kind of see why they get upset. Like if you're gonna own it. But when you sometimes like you get Black Rose, you play the sister, you do all that stuff, right? So she plays in this Emilia Perez movie, right? And she goes to accept her award, and she was like, my grandmother's an immigrant from the Dominican Republic, and she would be proud. And for me to win it, I'm the first Dominican actor to win a Best Supporting Actress, and I'm sure I won't be the last. And to do it speaking in a role of speaking Spanish, they're like, oh, now all of a sudden that's cool. But before you were taking all the black roles, you were cool with taking all the black roles, right? So they don't like that. Come on.
Did she play? Did she play the singer? Oh man, what's her name? Legendary black singer.
Oh yeah, Nina Simone.
And then I think she blacked her face up, right? Yeah.
Right. And they also don't like all the British actors coming over.
I was gonna bring it up. That friggin' who's the guy who's so upset about Star Wars? Bayan.
John, Bayan, yeah. But I'm saying that the FBA say they don't like that they're losing. Even Samuel L. Jackson made a comment about it once, about how they're losing roles. It's not just black roles in Hollywood because it's few, but it's the black icons. Like, why don't they get to play Nina Simone? Why don't they get to play Martin Luther King? I mean, you can go down the list. They're not wrong that all the people playing them were immigrants.
Yeah, immigrants, and also like, I mean, we have so many amazing, great Black American actors, that could play those roles. Yeah.
Right, but they're getting the iconic. It's not like they're beating us out on roles. I mean, go get the job is what I say. Be a better actor, but they can't even play the American civil rights icons. Right?
I wish they had played MLK and Selma with a really deep English accent. That would be too completely what the fuck? This guy's
it's
from
like
Liverpool?
The only one they never were mad about was Idris Elba though. I don't know because he did it so well, and the Wire they didn't know.
Yeah, him and Stringer Bell. That dude, man, what a fucking amazing.
But everybody else they were mad at, right? Yeah. They kind of gave the Black Panther guy a pass. Remember, he played James Brown.
Oh, did he?
Yeah.
Michael B. Jordan?
No.
No, he's American.
The guy who died of cancer.
Oh, Chadwick Boseman. Wait, he's American, right?
No.
What?
No.
Holy shit! I'm done mourning his death. Fuck that. Fuck that, Charles. I only cry for dead Americans.
I don't know if any of. I think Samuel L. Jackson and Denzel are the only Black foundational Black American actors.
Wow. Well, it's interesting. Damn. Well, it's interesting too because the amount of research you'd have to do, to track down, your roots, and have you?
Because if I appear Black and I'm acting, I'm not gonna. Even if I know my parents, if I'm an immigrant, right? But you don't ask on the application. You just say we want an actor to play this role. You go in, you read for it, and they hire you. And say, I just want to let you know I'm not really Black.
Mm-hmm.
My parents are from Sweden.
Right.
What are you gonna do? I mean. Yeah. But you know how you solve that problem? Where I break from the FBAs is you solve that problem by not delineating based on DEI. You hire whoever you want to hire. But no, they don't want that. They still want they want to hang on they want to carve out the DEI pieces they want. They want some special treatment, but they want it to be specifically FBAs and not everybody.
Yeah. And, and I'm going to bring up something that, we definitely don't have enough time to get into it here, but I'd love to talk with, you and Will about it, maybe on another, like Cut the Bull podcast. And when it comes to like reparations and how that reparations relates to, these arguments, because I've actually come around to, I think, supporting the idea of reparations to a certain point. Mm-hmm. And the one question that I've been asking, people who are in favor of it is just like, how much money do you want? Like what?
10 trillion.
Yeah, exactly. Like what is that check? Cut that check. Like say we were able to take care of it this afternoon. Name a number, cut the check, and then, be done with it. And
nope, you can't get the second part either.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. You can't be done with it. Yeah. Because And it's and that's the thing too, because like, if I think that if I was, sort of the aggrieved, I'd be like, hey, you know what? If someone was able to do the math, cut me a check for 10 mil, tax free. All right, I think I can move on with my life and me and my family and all that. But yeah,
I'm not saying that I agree with it, but I can make an argument for anything.
Yeah.
What I will say isn't the better way to do it? Make the check smaller and do the second half, just like don't make them pay taxes. So then you just don't collect from them. And that way you're not outlaying trillions of dollars. Just say for the next 40 years, Blacks don't have to pay taxes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And me, I don't know how you pick which Blacks those are.
I mean me as a libertarian, I am against taxes. So
wait, do they get a card? Because I'm assuming you want them to not pay sales taxes too. You could do the easy thing on income taxes and real estate taxes, but what do you do about sales taxes? Because that's a good percentage of the taxes you pay. Yeah. Gas taxes, right? You got to pay taxes when you go pump gas, right? You want to get out of all of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I would love to see, and I'm sure there's somebody out there, an economist who's done the work. Maybe like someone like Phil Magnus has done the math on it. But it's sort of how do you come to a number? How do you figure out kind of unrealized gains? Because I guess you would need to say compare Black America, like if you were comparing like Black Americans to white Americans who were kind of from the founding, who were born here, and sort of where are white Americans as far as wealth? How much wealth they have over the centuries, and are you kind of doing a 1-to-1? Like, oh, this kid in south side of Chicago, he is owed the same amount of money as this kid from Nantucket, Martha's Vineyard or something like that. But I think it would be an interesting combo to.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see how people would try to do it. I don't see it happening for many reasons, but not even the ones that everybody else talks about. How about the fact I don't think they can gain consensus within the people that would be eligible for it about what to do. Like some people like direct check. Some people put it in the neighborhood, and some people will be like, but everybody doesn't live in the same neighborhood.
Yeah.
So now you're penalizing the people who moved out. Or some people will say tax, so they wouldn't even be able to kind of, agree on how to do it for one. Then you got to do, is everybody going to be willing to give up their DNA in order to do whatever testing they take to see whether you're eligible? There's a lot of factors in it. And then no one wants to talk about because they don't really care, but it's still a factor what it does to the country and what poor whites and other poor people would think about that while they're struggling. They've been struggling for 4 or 5 generations and they see this happen. How does it change the dynamics of the country? I mean, I wrote a pretty long, I think, even-handed piece about it. I think it was that Newsweek. I have to send you the link. So,
send me the link. I'll definitely share it
out. But yeah, I mean, and then is it punitive? So the last piece is what goes away? Because the second part of what you said was, and then be done with it. So do we get rid of many of the set-asides for blacks, and then for all the social network, the social safety nets, are blacks now not eligible? But how do you get food stamps when I just gave you a $10 million check? So now are blacks now not eligible for government, any government assistance, Section 8, food stamps, Medicaid, any of that kind of stuff? Are they not eligible for that?
Right.
Do we count that as income? You're not taxing it, but do you count it as income as to whether they're eligible for certain things or that? Because I think many people will be like, no, I still want to have eligibility. This is just to clear up the past. Why should we be eliminating stuff going forward? And then the people who were on your side, you're going to lose some of them.
Yeah, you're going to lose something. You're going to be like, listen, you got $10 million. You don't need to be on, you don't need an EBT card. You need a Amex Platinum card, if anything. Charles Love, thank you so much. This has been my fun conversation, freewheeling conversation with Charles Love, co-host of the amazing podcast, Cut the Bull podcast. And Charles, thank you so much for taking the time. And I hope everybody enjoyed this as much as I did.
I appreciate it. Always good talking to you. Let me know when, and I'm always there.
Sweet.